Hi, this is JD, John Davidson, and I'm so happy to be speaking with you. And thank you so much for tuning in to this special presentation of what to remember when entering. And the name of the poem that I'm going to be using today to open things up and to draw insights, take inspiration, is called What to Remember When Entering. And I came up with this poem because in the process of moving into a new year, I see a way forward that I can only see partially. When we stand before a creation, an outcome, a goal, a vision, there's only so much of it that we can be certain of in terms of what might play out. There's a certain part of the story that we don't know and we have to be ready for, and we have to be able to use what we can find, what knocks on our door, what presents itself constructively, so that we can maximize our greatest sources of creating. What this poem is about for me is it points at the most important part of the creative process. There are three. First is the end result, or what you might call the orientation, which is to orient yourself to the aim of what you're trying to create, your ultimate goal. What are you trying to move toward as an outcome? And so that motivates you because you're drawn from how much meaning that outcome has for you. And this helps because it helps to love something before you create it. That love is what you motivate your intention by. Your intention is born out of loving your creation before you bring it into life. So that's the orientation. It's the orientation of the creative. And that's one component or one facet of the creative process. Of course, the second component is the technical piece, the mechanics of the creative process, the how. And the how is something that you partially know how to do. Perhaps some of the creations or outcomes that you're building or generating are things that you know how to do. So if you have a craft, let's say you're creating a house and you're an architect, obviously you're going to know some technical ability that you're going to apply to what you're trying to bring into being. But every creation is not the same. There's always nuances and improvisations and experimentation that makes the process of creating something its own reward. Because it's not just about how we create it, but also how we are formed or transformed in the process. Creating is not about self-improvement. The focus is not on the creator. The focus is on the creations we create. And by virtue of changing our focus to a more outcome-oriented orientation, we become more effective at creating. We're able to stay objective. We're able to stay true to ourselves and report what the current reality is in terms of the current stage of the creation is in. And so we know where to go next. But there's another part of the creative process that has very much to do with why I'm talking about this poem today. What to remember when entering. And it has to do with the source of our creations. I'm intrigued with the question, where do creations come from? And an easy answer might be, well, they come from our spirit. But what does our spirit collect? How does our spirit become inspired in spirit to then point energy and enthusiasm in a direction of our creations? See, inspiration is something that is inbound. Intention is outbound. Now, both are powerful organizing forces from which we can make our decisions, and they certainly can go hand in hand. And I like to look at two interesting gateways to how we compose an intention versus take inspiration in something. When you think of taking inspiration in inbound, you probably think of receiving, listening, revelation, inheritance, which would be a sort of listening, a generative listening, gathering, making space for something, seeing something that you didn't normally see. Something becomes true, an epiphany, a eureka, an aha moment where you say, oh, I see what to do. A lot of times when we pay attention, when we bring our quality of attention to our current moment, when we stay real present to what we're currently experiencing, something in the experience starts to become true for us. We begin to see heart and meaning in the experience. We become transformed by the experience. The experience reveals something hidden from our vision. And so we see it, and it becomes what I call a defining feature. A defining feature are the most important sources of inspiration where we are personally struck with heart and meaning. by an experience, by something we see, by an encounter, by a sudden moment when something catches us, and it catches us by a surprise. It astonishes us. It moves us to say to ourselves, what is that? That's something I'm very drawn to. Our thoughts start to well up around it. We become kind of subscribing to the importance of something that becomes important. It didn't matter before, but now it matters now. And it comes out of the ongoing flow of living. It becomes available to us through the process of living. And so that process of living, that moment-by-moment access to this, I think of a remembrance. There's something that we must remember to not disturb that reception. There's something we've got to remember that helps us position ourselves like an antenna that drives up the places of potential for us to receive inspiration, to take inspiration into what we do and take inspiration into what we say. And then we can decide, based on those newly found desires, what we really want, what we love, what we find heart and meaning in, we can decide where to go with it. We can connect with it. We can stay true to it. We can decide to follow it. We can line it up, load it up like in our torpedo tubes so that we act upon and we bring into where these sources of inspiration are telling us to go. But there's so many inner enemies that hold us back. And so I'd like to get into the poem now, and I'm going to go through the poem once. It's a relatively long poem. And then what we'll do is we'll take it apart, and we'll go into different parts and then use these parts as applications. And my highest hopes for you, after listening to this audio, is that you will notice that you are capable, you have more power, you have more choice in being available to non-adjacent things. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you enter into the moment, it's okay for you to not know what to make sense of, to cultivate an open mind, and to start from nothing. This is going to be a big idea, this start from nothing. What does nothingness mean? How do we start from nothing? How do I get into a space where I can enter from nothing no matter what conditions I'm in? So what is it that I need to remember? What do I need to remember when I'm entering from my sources of creation, when I'm entering into the moment to receive the potential future that is seeking me to come into being? Let's begin. Enter here. Enter here. This is the process of initiation. It is the beginning of opening the place where mysteries sleep. It is the beginning of opening the place where mysteries sleep. The story of entering, as entering would have it, is about to begin. The story of entering, as entering would have it, is about to begin. Enter the day with death close at hand. You'll amount to the big stuff. Enter the day with death close at hand. You'll amount to the big stuff. Death shows you how to live. Enter the night with space for God's installations. Just enter the night with space for God's installations. You cannot tell where He seats His inputs, but only remember the tools given to you. The future needs them. The future needs them. Seeking you prior to your seeking unites with the flow. Enter the conversation with open book. Perfection is what you don't have. Memorize nothing. Take the journey first, and the relationships will fall into place. Take the journey first, and the relationships will fall into place. The naked conversation awaits its cue behind your confrontation with powerlessness over the other. The naked conversation awaits its cue behind your confrontation with the powerlessness over the other. Enter from the wounds that brought you to know the world and the world to know you. Wounds are like breadcrumbs that mark the way. Wounds are like breadcrumbs that mark the way. way you learn is by living fully. The way you learn is by living fully. When you come to know what to do, it's because you started with nothing. You come to know what to do because you started with nothing. Enter your inner talk with curiosity. Remember the voice from your history telling you what looks just like it did yesterday. Remember the voice from your history telling you what looks just like it did yesterday. Enter there. Enter there, but from your inexperience. Only you can maintain it, not the old you, patterns, the habits, but the courageous part of you to seek what's inconsistent, non-adjacent, and different. You can meet this without arguing. Enter despair without expectation. Regret shows you where to leave nothing out. Regret shows you where to leave nothing out. Don't wait. Don't wait. Enter the present moment as a whole person. The thorns and the roses scent come with you. Enter the negativity from legitimacy. It is sharp, intelligent, and significant if you make space for it. Don't pretend it lives away from you. The bad and the good sides are roommates with essential opposition. Enter from light by starting from dark. The darkness precludes the light. The darkness precludes the light. Nothing is not the opposite of something. Nothing is not the opposite of something. It is the place where being begins. It is the place where everything begins. Enter the week from a place of rest in the middle of things, if you back up enough to see it. Virtual possibilities fan out right before your eyes, if you back up enough to see it. What was ordinary becomes the miraculous. Alertness makes the familiar something additional than what could be real. Put down the weight of your aloneness. Skipping over the entry point is your predicament. You can enter from anywhere, anytime. But amnesia is the forgetting that validity is only in one disruptive place. The wild card life plays and warps predictions. Place faith in your unexpected receptions, not your listening that hears what you know. Choice is your entry. Entering from here is leadership. The answers used to come from outside to appoint you, but now the answers come from inside. When they do, people trust you. Enter even though temptation attempts a diversion. Even if you make space for its gaze, the grasp loses to something better to do. Partial possession of your intention is yours, and the rest of it is left to arise from wise innocence. But remember, your basic goodness locates expansions. You stand poised with 0-point resistance to the blessings that await you. You have honored your inner voice so the world can hear it. You have honored your inner voice so the world can hear it. What to remember when entering. We all have a moment, we have a place right here, right now, where we can stay with exactly what is. Not too preoccupied with the future, not caught in our concepts or our mental constructs or interpretations or edits, not our edited self of what we think we are or aren't, or we're not thinking about what others are thinking. We're separate from what we are. We're separate from what we do. We're separate. We occupy kind of a second person relationship with the life that's here. So rather than seeing what we are habitually seeing, we enter from a place of nothing. And that's what this poem is really hinting at, is what consists of nothing. What is nothing? Where is no thing? How do we return and remember to start with nothing? How do we start our day with nothing? It's hard, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, you plug it into your head, your logic can't get it. It's just sort of, whoa, I can't start my day with nothing. I have to fix on something. How am I going to have my sanity? How am I going to have a life with my nervous system with this kind of ambiguity and committed powerlessness? But I think it's more than that. It's a certain courage. It's a certain connection. It's a compassion that you are poised with. It's a receptivity. So I start right in with enter here. And enter here is saying that you don't need to go to preferred conditions to enter. You know, you hear a lot of times people say, well, if I could only get things quiet. Well, if I could only step away from being busy. Well, if I could only. Well, if I could get to the ocean. Well, if I could take a couple of days off. Well, I haven't even had time to think. I'll do it on my next vacation. Kick the can down the road on reflection. Kick the can down the road on looking from this place. I'll hang it up. I'll put it over there. You know, it's not convenient. It doesn't comply with the real life. And so we disqualify it. We put it away. And that's really the tragedy, is that we don't fully live, despite what we actually have going on the top side, on the surface. We forget to truly occupy a mindfulness of what we're doing, of being aware, of being alert, of being attentive, of being present as a primary choice. No matter what it is, it's our ability to meet what it is. So I start with enter here. You might ask, well, where do I enter? You know, how do I get the sound of it? How do I listen to my deeper soundings inside? How do I listen to my soul? How do I slow down enough to be able to catch it? Well, that's the problem, is there is no slowing down enough. And if you only did it when you could slow down enough, well, that's being pretty episodic. It's being pretty spotty about it, because you're only going to find certain moments of clearance when you get access to divine guidance, or you get access to some of the greater intelligence that you can imbue in your choices, that you can occupy in making great choices, choices that are on purpose, choices that are intentional, choices that affect your quality of life. And so we become kind of aware of how important it is to be aware. When we are aware, we're aware that we see things from a place of being familiar with our storage units. Our storage units are the data bytes in our head, our concepts that we've collected through time from the past, that we reuse for sense-making of what's going on. So as we take on the next moment in life, we first go to our database, because that's naturally what our brain as a mechanism is inclined to do, is it has a cognitive reflex. We don't really think. We just kind of categorize and put things in their place by making sense of it. We see what the content is of our mind. We see what we perceive rather than perceive what we see. And then we forget we have a model, that we forget that we actually have filters. We forget that we have lenses, you see. And this is really the problem. This is the fundamental problem, is that we forget that we are actually participating in what we're making up to be true through the very activity of our own thought. Thought is a very interesting thing. You know, it says, well, how did that happen? Well, I wonder what showed up to be this way. And then we say, well, boy, you know, I wonder how that happened. And it's sort of like thought is sort of saying, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. But all too far, all too much, we just don't cut loose from our automatic mind stuff. That's what yoga means. It means to cut loose of our automatic mind stuff. That's the training. It's a life training, that at any moment we can cut loose of our automatic mind stuff, our habituated judgment. There's a time and place for us to be judging, of course. But the kind of judgment I'm talking about is premeditated judgment, where rather than offering a sort of understanding of things to invalidate what we already know and offer ourselves a more accurate representation of what's going on, we fall all too far into our own perceptions and expectations and interpretations. And when we get too hung up on those things, we disturb ourselves with all sorts of emotional cadence, and we we fumble our inner life. So enter here. This is the process of initiation. It's right now. The process of initiation is the process of you becoming conscious. The process of initiation is the moment that you're aware that you have some level of quality of awareness that you can bring to the present, that you can change your awareness to bring forth a different source of listening and attending, and that creations and the source of the creative act will be enabled in inspiration. Your inspirational receipts, your inbound inspiration will be commensurate with the quality of mind that you have. That's the mind shift. It is the beginning of opening the place where mysteries sleep. The place where mysteries sleep is the unfolding of the not yet emerging self. It's the unfolding of what's yet to be recognized. It's where information, matter, and mind come together. But the information, the properties of information, is it's not yet embodied. It's not in you. It's not information that you've held in your database and you can share it and teach it and talk about it. It's even beyond tacit, which would be information you've acquired through the automatic learning, like learning a language or learning how to walk or learning how to brush your teeth or learning how to drive a car. Those are tacit activities. You're tacit. It's habitual. But your whole being is not tied to your habituated thinking or your habituated habits. You have more awareness than that because you can stand back and hold some space between the activity of your habits, the habituated activity of your thinking and your behavioral habits, versus being aware and seeing your own seeing. So the story of entering would have it, is about to begin. The story of entering, as entering would have it, is about to begin. So you're releasing, you're suspending your obedience to what you know. And that's the work of the head. That's the work of the brain, and you also have a mind. And it's the moment of entry when mind is kind of looking through the aperture of the brain that you allow yourself to stand in the place in the room, to occupy a vantage point where you are the eye behind the eye, and that you are aware, and that there is an observer that is observing and witnessing that which is taking place. So that you separate from it so you get a perspective. You're able to make space in between to occupy range and fluency and choice. And also hands off. I mean, just to let go of control and manipulation and to arrive in meeting whatever's there without being a contortionist, without trying to make something against it or for it, or without occupying it, right? An occupation, to be occupied, to be preoccupied with something. It means just to be in good presence with it. It means that even though it may be negative or positive or whatever face it wears, whatever shows up in our life, we can develop a muscle, a mindful muscle, to make it interesting, to know that we don't identify with it. It does not define us, but it is in itself a phenomenon. It's occurring, and it's something that we can be so aware of, we can actually move with it rather than against it. Enter the day with death close at hand. Yes, you'll amount to the big stuff. Enter the day with death close at hand. This is the remembrance that you are not a mortal, you're not an elf. We come to terms with the fact that we all are going to die. That moment is not predictable. Sure, there are things that we can do to probably prevent it, but overall, we're doomed to make choices. At the end of it all, even if we make the choices, there is no true possession and ownership over our end-of-life moment. We all share that mystery. We're not sure, but we can live close to knowing it. And it teaches us how to live in the present. It teaches us that life is precarious and that life has a fragility to it. And it teaches us the brevity of life. It makes it clear that not all the aspects of our lives remain equal, that certain qualities in our life are more important. They have a greater intrinsic value and importance to us than others. Because when we live close to death, we start looking at life differently. We begin to participate differently in life. Not out of scarcity, not out of, oh my gosh, it's going to end soon, I better get to the punchline. But it helps us remember that because we are going to die, that living close to that death is helping us remember what matters. There was a great book written by Bronnie Ware. She was an Australian nurse, and she talks about the 5 regrets of the dying. And some of the most important regrets that the dying had is they wish they were true to themselves. Yeah. that they had expressed truly their feelings, that they hadn't worked so hard, that they hadn't lost touch with old friends, and that they had maintained their courage to live true to their desires and their aspirations without selling out to what was socially acceptable or getting approval. Amazingly, they were luminous and clear as ever in the last 3 weeks of their life. Why do we need to wait till those last 3 weeks of our life to get that clairvoyance? Because they knew death was on its way in, it sped up their relationship with the unlived life, with all the music in them that they didn't get a chance to play because they were running out of time. So death shows us how to live. And we enter the night. We enter the night with space for God's installations, meaning that when we go to sleep, when we turn off our alertness for the day, when we move into beta theta state, when we go into sleep and our brain is evacuating non-essentials, we need to sleep because our brain has limited space. We've been exposed to so much stimulus that the purpose of sleep is to purge and cleanse. It's to ignore non-essentials. It's the process of kind of moving across the eye of the needle and letting go of things that are not going to stay with us, that are data points that are not going to be useful, that we deem them as, let's move these out. And so we take out the garbage when we sleep, but we enter the night with space for God's installations. In other words, that when we are extracting those pieces, when we're making vacancy, we're not only keeping the things that we've collected, but we are allowing a listener in us that is awake in a different dimension to allow the installations of divine guidance, that we allow our sleep to be a place of taking installation, of revelation, of intention, of divine will coming toward us, so that we have a mind that is vacant and available for God's installations, seeing the world as He does, for inspiration, for the new, for non-adjacency, for seeing things that we are not completely in possession of, that we are possessed by the vulnerability of our sleeping, and that those sleeping moments are places where the mystery sleep, where we can see now through the movement, through forward movement, through the currents of life as we move, because we do not stop moving. Everything is in a state of change. It's the one thing that's constant, is that life is in a state of flux. Even though we try to fixate ourselves on what we think we are or what we think is true, the only way to validate what is real is by showing up in the present moment or sharing a moment with another human being. But we cannot come into what is really real by reapplying what we experienced before. That was an experience. It had a date. It had a time. It's going into our almanac and very good, but it's not going to go or escalate to being a fact. It's not going to be made into a conclusion so that we generalize again. We all have these things. We need generalizations. We need to have some knowledge to be able to get things going, to live an ordinary life, to be able to have some sense of stability. But we have to remember that we have models. And to question our models and inquire into our models is a very powerful practice. Maybe even the most powerful is the source of reflection. To be aware enough that we are holders of models and that we do not have to become we don't have to become trapped in those models when those models play out in ways that disturb our potential, our places of potential. You cannot tell where He seats His inputs. Talking about God's installations. We cannot tell where He seats His inputs, but only remember the tools given to you. To remember the tools that are given to you is to remember your own self-knowledge, your strengths, your abilities. Those are revealed to you through the process of heading into something that matters, doing meaningful work, making a difference, organizing your life around something that matters to you. It's a law of spiritual economics. But you cannot tell where He seats His inputs. You can't tell. We can't put a place in the skull to say, this is where you get divine guidance. This is the place where the inputs come. It's a space out of which the inputs come that you make. It's a listening to subscribe to a grander will that's greater than your puny will. But you only remember the tools given to you. And those tools that are given to you are revealed to you through the process of acting on creations, the intentions that inform you. If you want to kind of figure out or know more of what you have in you in terms of abilities and attributes, just start creating something you don't know how to create. You'll become very confrontive with what you don't know and what you do. You'll be able to see your factory-made skills. You'll be able to see down deep what you already have in you, unique abilities and personal gifts that you already have installed that were made for giving the world what belongs to it. And you're just a channel. You just have to get out of the way and listen and realize what that is. And that's where your installments are being put in terms of tools. But you have to use them. And the future needs these tools. You trust these tools with your life like a pilot in civilian aeronautics. When you trust your ability, when you trust your personal gifts, when you trust superior skills that give you energy, that enthuse you, not deplete energy. When you love what you do and do what you love, it's a constant return. It's a cycle. What you put out comes back tenfold. Not only in terms of material rewards, but the intrinsic rewards of just the process of doing it is its own reward. Seeing you prior to your seeking unites the flow. You're reading a book. You're learning something new. You saw something. You had an experience that you didn't know had prepared you for what was coming in the future. But once you get there, you strike it up as a coincidence. You say, boy, I didn't know why that was needed, but I can connect the dots behind me. So seeking you prior to your seeking unites the flow. You come to terms with how powerless you are because you don't know what the future is, but you can trust that what is coming in, what's showing up, by expecting nothing and being ready for anything is exactly what the future needs. It's up to you if you want to be captured by that. It's up to you if you want to play that. It's up to you if you want to make that or integrate that into your manner of living. Life sure gets interesting when you do, when you subscribe with faith. Faith in a direction that you don't altogether know, and you're not supposed to. That you leave out the other parts for the bigger will to fill in, co-creatively, wise innocence. You enter the conversation with open book. Yeah, because you haven't written the words on the pages. You haven't written the words on the pages. You open the book to open the book for the words. You receive the words on the pages. But your courageous act of opening the book is subscribing and meeting the moment, vacant, suspending your certainties. Your enemy is your voice of judgment. The voice of judgment that thinks it knows what is real. But you don't know what's real. You don't know what's real. All you have is a relative truth. You depend on others to see. It's true. You'll never know the truth. You'll never see what's real until your patterns of interaction. Relationship is the organizing structure to seeing the properties of what is. It is how things relate between that gives rise to how to define what is going on, what is true. Perfection is what you don't have. Perfection is what you don't have. You don't have perfection. You never arrive. You never get to the final countdown. There's never a point of arriving. It's the arriving that is the purpose itself. It's growth. It's evolving. Perfection is what you don't have. See, this allows you the infinite patience to know that the game is this. The nature of it is that there never will be a final holding space for your happiness. There will never be a final moment when you get suddenly happy. Happiness is a choice. Perfection is what you don't have. But there's a side of perfection that means genuine. So you're genuinely never perfect. You're genuinely you. You're genuinely the real McCoy. You're real. You're real in your whole person. Positives, negatives, ups, downs, good sides, bad sides, all that. You're a human being. You come with a full package. But you memorize nothing. You memorize nothing. That's the paradox. Your brain will memorize. But for you to participate in trusting those memories, you can integrate with that. You can introspect. You can look with observing eyes to see why you should trust those memories. You can invalidate those memories. That doesn't mean thought's the enemy. It means that you just are aware that you have thinking that comes from the database versus meeting what's going on with fresh eyes and learning something new. Staying long enough to understand so something new can happen, because what you make space for can move. When we are filled up with no vacancy, right? When we become so certain that we think we know what's going on, and then we attach it to our identity, we don't let anything creep in. There's no space. We're fundamentalistic in our truth. We're absent, not present. We don't make space for what's come. There's no field of power for consciousness to conjure up new. There's no seeing anything with fresh eyes. So memorize nothing. Cultivate a don't know mind. Take the journey first, and the relationships will fall into place. Take the journey first. The journey isn't the trip. The journey is the present. It's the courageousness of meeting the present. It's the honesty of your own powerlessness over life, that life is in the business of creating life, that you live in a larger system in which you enact. You are one particle of that system. But you don't take ownership of everything. To suggest that everything is your fault or that you're fully responsible is completely out of touch with other energy and anatomy that lives in the universe in which you swim. In the water that you swim, you're not responsible for the water, the behavior of everything, the cast of characters that are in it. Life cooperates with you. It is a wild card. But you are not in the level of control that you would love to believe you would be. And the only reason why you attempt to see yourself in control is because you're not. And we fear not having control because we're afraid of what the future is. We're afraid of what might unfold. We're afraid of disappearances. We're afraid of despair. We're afraid of loss. We're afraid of humiliation. We're afraid of losing our stability. We're afraid of sustaining ourselves. We're afraid of death. We're afraid. So we actually fatalize ourselves to seeing new things and enjoying the miraculous in seeing what we already see by opening our eyes, because we close off ourselves to qualities that might even be right in our periphery that we miss because we only see what we project rather than seeing what things are. And so we can re-help ourselves. We can be there for ourselves. We can take away the dirt from the window, open the curtain, and see again. Take the journey first, and the relationships will fall into place. And that's what letting go is. It's take the journey first. Have you ever gotten out of a relationship that you knew you needed to end, it was structured to end, and all of a sudden the next one came? And it almost seemed like, coincidentally, that when you had to get out of the first one, you got into the next one? Have you ever noticed it cleaning your closet? When you take the journey of purging things and isolating yourself from things that are no longer relevant, all of a sudden it makes space for something new, and it invites the new thing. It actually activates what's ready to become real, what's ready to be life and born. That the sentiment is what something is always on the way out, constantly. There's always something ready to die. And that if we trust that process of letting go, hands off, of release the things that are ready to move out, it's an ongoing flow to things that are ready to move in. But we keep looking again, and we keep looking again, and we keep looking again to want to see the familiar instead of being challenged into the frontier. And in the frontier, there's a way of living dangerously. Take the journey first, and the relationships fall into place. The naked conversation awaits its cue. That's because you're never prepared for what life is going to bring. You've gone into presentations before, and you know that what you said was exactly what the room needed. There were a whole bunch of other coordinating factors that brought forth how you animated your energy and your behavior in that room. The naked conversation awaits its cue. Yeah, it's because you got to trust yourself. A naked conversation comes out of your own anxiety. Actors know this before they go on stage. They get nervous before scenes. But the mature ones know that the naked conversation awaits its cue. It's waiting in the wings. It's behind. It's watching for its opening, because that's the essential self. So we can prepare and then let go. If we prepare too much, then we're on script and we're not truly imbuing our own authentic self, our own voice, and we don't draw it forth. And that voice is very much in communion with all the other aspects that the space is informing It's a collective dream when we enter the moment in relationship to other things. That what's being created is also enfolded into the things that are in the space. It's not just us. We're not just this lone on an island creator. We are in the interaction. We are in this orientation which is between us, that which we are is affected by interdependence. We're not just composed of our own closed system. We're open systems. We're walking systems that are inbound and outbound. There's energy flow patterns of energy and so forth that go in and out in relationship to other things. And that which we're in relationship with certainly interacts with our quality of mind, our state of mind, and also how our brain applies its thinking. It awaits its cue. The naked conversation awaits its cue behind your confrontation with powerlessness. When you realize that what you expect is never going to end up, probably, and this isn't pessimistic, and it's not definitely pessimistic, but rarely is it going to end up where you expect. Your expectations are constantly not being met. That's not a bad thing. That's because what's not being met is something that life is filling in. It's the ad lib of life. It's the parenthesis that you have to make space for to invite life, to build that readiness for entry. Enter here. This is the process of initiation. You have powerlessness over the other. See, you're not powerful enough to manipulate the other in your own net. There's only a certain part of you that's going to impress the other, that your ego wants to have the world perceive you. But then they're under the spell or they're under the possession of their own divine guidance. They're under the possession of their own intentions, their own knowledge. They have their own creative sources. Hands off, man. There's only certain parts of you that can control and manipulate. And then you have to know the limits of it. And that's part of outgrowing your adolescence and understanding just how powerless you are. But that doesn't take away your power. It's just it's a shift from which you construct power, because the power is no longer in you. The power is in the inspiration. The power is in what you want to create. Picasso said the power is in the painting. That was the shift. It wasn't in the painter. It was the transmission from the meaning of the painting, the end result of the painting, the inspiration of the image of the painting, back into what he wanted to create. Power was in the painting. Grant power to the painting. Who doesn't have a dysfunctional family? We all have them. Everyone. We all have them. So we enter the world from our wounds, but the world enters us from our wounds. Our wounds are necessary because our wounds become powerful, constructive teachers. We learn how to live with pain. We learn how to bring our attention to things that are not easy to occupy our attention. We all have a level of cynicism that lives inside of us that protects us from pain and backs us away from being hurt and bounding us to our true feelings, our open heart. And it isolates us and it isolates other people. Despite wanting to be along or belong and being attended to and wanting to get our needs met and to connect with our deepest sources of love and receiving love, we cut ourselves off. We cut ourselves off from that possibility. Cut ourselves off from that possibility. And that possibility is what makes us feel numb, like we lose a part of ourselves that we need to reclaim. And that reclaiming is through the wound. It's not around the wound. That our wounds point us to where we really need to soften our hearts. The way you learn is by living fully. The way you learn is by living fully. And learning comes from the process of being present. It comes from the choice to be present. Because learning is to acquire something new that you didn't see before. Learning is coming into knowing something that you didn't have before. And some of the best conditions for learning is, of course, to create something. When we're present moment by moment, we're able to offer ourselves a certain quality of attention that brings only just what is there to be there. It's to stay with what's happening. And when we learn to stay with what's happening, without running, without hiding, without denying, without exaggerating, we can use current reality as a very constructive source. Even standing back far enough, we can see current reality in a three-dimensional way when we start to listen from a place of an emerging future self. We can learn more self-knowledge by understanding our experiences and integrating them at a much more meaningful level, to be able to stand back and to ask ourselves how certain things that are going on right now are connecting with our deepest, most emergent self and our deepest sources of knowing what our real work is in the world, connecting with those sources of commitment, those sources of deep intention. And that's when our sources of creativity meet our quality of attention. Creating becomes awareness-based when we occupy this manner of living, this way of living into life fully. Really, life shouldn't be any particular way. Life is in the business of creating life. So hands off. We are making space for whatever the life is without bringing our judgment or our cynicism to it. And see, now, when we have a more open heart to see from voices other than our own, to listen from voices other than our own, by suspending our judgment, we are able to occupy that entering, that moment when things enter that we didn't normally be in reception to. And so when you come to know what to do, it's because you started with nothing. Starting with nothing, meaning nothingness is not the opposite of something. It is the beginning. It is the place from which being begins. It is the place from which all living things begin. It's the place from which all matter begins, from nothing. It is the source of the source. I remember a person asked me if I have any thoughts about where God came from and or whether God existed. And my reflection to him is, I said, what if this source was the source that may be behind God or had made God, if God was made from something? That this would be the all-knowing source, the source that would be the single force of gravity that brings things into relationship. That the universe was a widespread set of particles, a set of ingredients that had cohesive energy, that had attraction. And because of the gravity between the mass and the different particles, the behavior began in relating with each one. They began to behave in coordination to the other, that one pulled one into the other and so forth, and then it amassed into something unified. So there are natural forces that can cause a natural order, a certain order of creation. And these are forces that exist in the universe. And so again, part of attending from this place is to allow these co-creative information sources to come in and embody us, as we're acting from not yet embodied information, and we're subscribing to it. But you enter your inner talk with curiosity. Of course, because your inner talk is how you're processing things. It's what you're telling yourself. It's the private conversation. And of course, as we grow, as we become adults, we started early when the private conversation, the public conversation was one. But part of becoming adult, when we start to be sensitive to what other people think, or we develop an ego, we start to separate those two conversations, that the one that we want people to perceive on the outside is very different than the private one that we have going on the inside. And so we might even make the one on the inside a little secret self that we like to hide. And we like to make the one on the outside a false self that we like people to believe. And many of us have gotten so far into constructing this false self that it's terribly complex and very disturbing. Because one day, if it all comes down, or if somebody found out just how deceptive you are and how much of a misrepresenter and liar you might be, they really would question the very thing that is composing that false self, which is your shame. We all have it. We all have doubt. We all have shame, because that's what lies beneath the wound, is that something underneath our wound didn't go our way. We didn't know how to process it. And then that emotional energy came forth with some kind of conclusion. Well, I better, or this is the way it works, or that. And then we decided to, as a source of protection or security, we were going to reuse that again as a source of our shield and as a source of our sword. And we draw them at those conditions when they pop up again, and then we miss the opportunities. We miss seeing all the options that are available to us from which we could create. So enter your inner talk with curiosity. Yeah, that means turning toward yourself, and whatever it is that you are currently seeing and interpreting and constructing from your habituated thought, stand back. Just know that it's there. Offer curiosity to it. Offer that gentle heart, that soft heart to it. And remember the voice from your history telling you what looks just like it did yesterday. Of course, remember the voice from your history that tells you that it looks the same. That's what your brain is doing. It is the mechanism to use your belief systems, to use your concepts, to use your mental constructs, from which it can make sense of the world. It can know right, wrong. It habituates your perceptions. It tells you that you know what it is. But when you stand back, you don't have to occupy that certainty, and the world becomes so much more interesting, and your creative options open up to you. You are not fixed. So enter there from your inexperience. And so you only want to maintain it, not the old you, the patterns, the habits. You want to maintain your inexperience. Maintain your inexperience, but the courageous part of you to seek what's inconsistent, non-adjacent, and different. Non-adjacency. So you've had those moments, right? You've looked in your past and you've had moments where you took a left turn. Suddenly something popped in, an illness, or someone died, or a sudden moment when you had no way of knowing, and it just completely, it just T-boned you, so to speak. It's like a car going through the intersection, in a blind intersection, and boom, a car comes, just bam. It just catches you off guard. And you have a knee-jerk reaction to some event that came in that was completely unexpected. And so life has a messy therapy to it. It is not predictable. We can only create a future. We can't predict one. So when you occupy this place, you are courageous. Your part of you is courageous to seek what's inconsistent, non-adjacent, and different. You can meet this without arguing with it. Argument with life is anger. Anger is another way of getting to this life force, but it's not the best way to do it. Anger is a way of not, it's saying no to the idea of being as broken as I'm describing. Anger is a way of staying away from the admittance that you are a human being who is flawed and incomplete and has the opportunity to praise that too. You have downsides, good sides, thorns, rosy scents, and all that. You come with the full package. That's you. No one has your fingerprint. You're the only one. But you come to the moment as a whole person. So you can meet this without arguing. If you argue with it, then you're the enemy. Einstein said the most important question is to ask if life is an unfriendly place. If we believe that life is an unfriendly place, just stand back and look at how a human being would play life. Life is an unfriendly place. Well, I'm going to go on the defense. I'm going to close off to other possibilities. I'm not going to trust anything. Not going to trust me, trust others. Everything looks like a betrayal, even though it's not. I'm going to close off, and I'm going to do something about it. And where I'm going to end up is something really interesting. It may not be in a happy place. It may not be on point with what I can do or what I want to do. But it doesn't leave me with a lot of choices. Enter despair without expectation. Sure, because we all have it. Look, we all have negative feelings. We all have bad days. They make us appreciate good days. We have unsatisfying experiences. We have discouragements and disappointments. Those are realities. It's how we meet them. We are afraid. We do have fear. Why we're afraid? Because we don't want to get hurt. We love ourselves enough to not want to hurt us. So we imagine phantoms around the corner, and then we do something preemptively to prevent it. Fear. False evidence appearing real. We start to compose an action out of an anticipation of an outcome because we're using the past again and projecting it on the present. But when we learn to let that go, let go of fear, what's left? Love. Love is the conservation of legitimacy. It's conserving legitimacy, conserving acceptance, that what the life is that we are getting is what the future needed this moment. So we enter despair without expectation, and regret shows you where to leave nothing out. Don't wait, because whatever you regret is pointing to you what matters to you. So you only know kind of what mattered once you do something. Once you do it, you kind of change your mind. You say, well, no, it doesn't matter as much, or maybe it matters more than it did before. But whatever you regret is the signpost to telling you maybe what to accelerate in terms of what matters and to organize your life in that way. So don't wait. If you procrastinate and deprive yourself of such a fantastic thing, to trust your gifts with your life, trust your desires with your life, of the King, desire what you love, then you're not true to yourself. Fundamentally, even if you can't get it, even if there's no physical way you can get it, you still could owe it to yourself to be true. If I want to be a soprano singer, but I'm a baritone, but I can't ever be a soprano because I don't have the physicality to do it, and I'll never know whether I could because I don't know. The only way I'll know whether it's real is to create it. But I still focus my attention in the intention. I take inspiration in what has meaning and heart for me. And that is not going to be just about me, right? What I take inspiration in, let's face it, folks, what you get inspiration is not between just you and you. This poem is not just about you stepping into your best self. This is about you and other. Questions of the heart, questions of cynicism, question of wounds is a question of how the other brings you into you. You can't come home to your best without others seeing you. It's not possible. You come into being through relating. Love is the single best form of intelligence. It's the single most potent form of intelligence. So to say when someone says you are beautiful, the fact that they see you as beautiful, their perception changes you. If you see the other as beautiful, then they are beautiful because of your seeing. Your perceptions are generative. They participate in that which you see. They participate in changing the subject matter. Isn't that interesting that the inner place from which you see, when you see things as they are, there's an allowance for it. There's an acceptance. When the teacher sees the beauty in the troublemaker stops behaving with trouble. When you see the love in the other because you're living in a friendly place and you're seeing that there is capacity in the other, it's not naivete. It doesn't mean you're underprepared for the bad sides, but it means that you're willing to open your eyes to see more. And that act of seeing, of constructing an accuracy of seeing, is participating in how the properties of the other become true. The only way for them to see what's real is through you seeing. Neither one of you know what's real. The minute you think you know what's real, you're commanding obedience. There's something deficient about that. That if I say I know what's real and you don't, hey, don't you see this? Hey, don't you see this? You're commanding obedience. It's power over. Everyone has a million different perceptions about what's real. All of us have a sense of what we think is real. But we come into knowing what's real through each other, through dependence. So enter the present moment as a whole person. The thorns and the roses sent come with you. Bring your negativity and your positivity to the present. Don't leave it out. People trust you when you look down into your grief. People trust you when you're in touch with the fact that you have moments of despair, depression, all those things. Don't act like you've got it all together. You don't. You don't have to be. We're all bozos on the bus. And when you get that, the price of looking good is very pricey. You don't need to. You're the only one keeping score. So the process of becoming real is a process of reconnecting to something that helps people see you, that opens yourself to people and reveals you to people in ways that they want to represent or mirror back the same. And so the thorns on the roses sent come with you. Look, your shit stinks, right? Mine does too. You and I pee and we fart and we put on our pants and we do all the same things. We're human beings. We're pretty lazy human beings. We're pretty pessimistic about things. We're moody. We don't need to have a positive attitude to come toward the things that we really want to create. Try raising kids or try to stay in a career for a long period of time and maintain a positive attitude, right? Fuck that. It doesn't work that way because being a human being means being in touch with there will be range. There will be moments of despair. There will be moments of highs and lows and all that. It's about making space with it. It's about relating with it and having that. But that does not become what orients us in the direction of taking inspiration. Look, we can have all that, but we can still create what we want because we're not occupying that standard of reference. Just because we have thorns, just because you have parts of you that you hate, doesn't disqualify you as a bad person. You're going to have moments that you're beautiful, moments when you're not. Moments when you played it right, moments when you didn't. Mistakes that you screwed up, great things that you did. Be available to it all. And that way you don't need to qualify what other people need to be for you. Don't try to change them. You'll say to your cousin Susie, who's got a few of her thorns, Susie, I don't want you to change a thing. Oftentimes the way people are behaving towards others is because the others haven't given them that kind of acceptance, and they're in reaction to it. So when you're helping them show up as a whole person, all they can bring you is what disconfirms your beliefs. See, I think Barbara's a jerk. Therefore, Barbara becomes a jerk. Why? Because I keep Barbara in isolation because I think she's a jerk. I may not be available to seeing what other people see in her, but maybe those are qualities that could be there. I got to put that in check. But no, I go on in life with those qualities remaining unchecked. I can't do that. That's being unaware. So we enter the negativity from legitimacy. Sure, it's sharp, it's intelligent and significant if you make space for it. You can be negative about negativity or not. You don't have to be. We all have negativity. We have divorces. We have bankruptcies. We have loss. We have death. We have sickness. We have people that are they're out to get us. They're enemies. We have bullies. We have negativity. To act like it's not there and everything would be bliss and we get to do everything. Yes, we do get to do everything, but we don't have to like it. It's not all fun and games, and we don't need to act like it trying to seek an area of comfort. That would be in denial. That's hypnosis. That's being on drugs. But we can develop our psychological resilience and our tolerance and our infinite patience to receive life as it is. Sure, it's sharp. Sure, it's intelligent. But the question is, can we stay with it? And if we stay with it long enough, it will reveal something. We can make it our teacher. Think about situations where you were so lost and confused, you didn't know what to do. But if you just remained long enough to seek an understanding, something could move, and it did. And you stayed in the gray long enough until something struck you. Something stood out clearly as a path. And that path evolved, and it opened itself up. It was a journey. Don't pretend it lives away from you. Yeah, don't. Don't pretend. Don't pretend that you don't have all the same stuff. Don't pretend that suddenly you're better than the other. Don't pretend that all that's contained. Don't pretend and fake the world that you're happier than you are. That's just an abuse for yourself. You don't need to be so cheerful and generous and happy trying to prove to people that you're not selfish. There's a part of you that is. And what you disown in other people is what you disown in you. So recognize that. The bad and the good sides are roommates with essential opposition. Of course. Because if I don't have those bad moments, how do I appreciate the good ones? Those bad moments are just as valid as the others. They don't have to always be useful. I don't always have to look for the good and the bad. I can just be with the bad. And if I'm with the bad, I'm going to have moments of truth with that bad. I'm going to report that to myself, and I know that there's going to be good moments. But I'm not clinging to every moment having to satisfy me. I'm not the entitled one that says life is going to be centered around how I feel. You feel what you feel. You enter from light by starting from dark. Sometimes that's the remembrance, is that by entering from the dark, the night, you will see the end. You just have to keep walking. When I enter my room, my bedroom sometimes, I have the light off. If I stand there and wait for the light to turn on, it doesn't. If I walk to it, I don't quite know where the path is. I might trip and fall, but I walk cautiously. But by walking and turning on the light, I give myself the illumination. I'm able to see it. But I had to take the moment of walking. I walked through the dark. It precludes the light. Sure, we have moments of despair, chaos, entropy. We lose jobs. We lose money. We have loss. We go to poverty. We lose it all. Everything we own burns down one day. Something happens. We have a cathartic moment. We have a loss of life. We have a loss of a child. We have a loss of a husband, a loss of a wife, a loss of people. Loss. Things that we didn't want to have taken away from us were taken. So we do. And life moves. And nothing stays the same. And everything is impermanent. And so the darkness precludes the light. The night has eyes because the light has to be next. Subsequently, the light is after the dark. And we have to remember this, that nothing is not the opposite of something. That darkness is often the place from which we do not see what's coming. We just don't see it. And it is the place where being begins. Our being begins from nothingness. It begins from entering the week from a place of rest in the middle of things. That doing nothing helps us rest our nervous systems. Doing no thing is something. To reflect, to not have to fill it with entertainment, to sit quietly on an airplane without having all the things to do, to be comfortable in our own skins, to be able to live with the silence without desperation, but the sweetness of silence. Take a place of rest in the middle of things. Reminds us of the choice we have to slow down. And if we do, that's within our grasp because we can only do what we can with the time that we have. Priority management is self-management. If we take the time to meditate, if we take a moment to work out, if we go on a walk out in nature, if we get together with a group for reflection, if we have family meetings and talk about what we're learning, that's not in direct proportion to creating our material things, but that's in direct proportion to our evolution and growth and our involvement in life and our sense of connection, which are also vital to energizing ourselves as human beings and increasing our health and wholeness. Virtual possibilities fan out before your eyes if you back up enough to see it. So when we are outside of it, when we're outside of our normal cadence of life, we see things. It's like backing up from being in love, isn't it? Mom said, hey, don't be so in love. Step back. You're blind. She was right. She was right. We backed up. We saw it. We saw what we were doing. We saw what they were doing. We connected the dots, and then we intelligently played back in. We came back into it. Same thing when you're out. When you take away time to the timeless and you go off, you recreate yourself. Recreation, to recreate or rejuvenate. To become young again, to rejuvenate yourself, is to go out in nature and to step away. And it doesn't always have to be productive. You're not always having to do something. If you're always having to do something, you're addicted to doing something. Because that doing something is a fix for you to avoid not doing something. Because if you didn't not do something, if you didn't have something to do, you'd probably get very, very bored. And that boredom is what's signaling to you that you have lost your comfort with silence. And when you're not seating in your silence, you're probably not at the highest level of listening or reception that you could be. Silence does help. It's when you're not silent that also is important to develop this muscle, to enter here. But silence is like reception on steroids. It's the extra accessibility to our best thinking and our best reflections and sense-making of things and being able to see things and process them and be able to see what has heart and meaning and take inspiration and see what's in our surprises in life and be able to sense what's next. Virtual possibilities fan out before your eyes. In other words, new futures that haven't come yet become possible. You begin to see how things are going to fit together. You begin to see options when you loosen the grip of being busy. You can't be too busy being busy to do what could make you a lot less busy. The incessant freneticness of it all is the heart of the problem. We've got to go slow to get fast. Slow is the new fast. Alertness makes the familiar something additional than what could be real. Yeah, when you're alert, you offer yourself, or you offer an awareness to what is going on to start seeing what's really there. You integrate your experiences at a much more meaningful level, and then you put down the weight of your aloneness. Being alone is learning how to love. Because love is another human being being legitimately who they are by letting them be luxuries in our life, by letting them be enrichments in our life, but not ones that we depend on, because that puts them in awkward positions to serve us. Instead of having ownership of their own way, their own growth, their own choices, We must learn how to confront the freedom of other people, their freedom to choose, their freedom to choose the way they choose to be, the way they choose to create, the way they choose to listen. This is very, very powerful. What we're talking about here is this putting down the weight of your aloneness. Learning to be alone is learning how to love someone. Think about it, your husband or wife. When you really are loving them from the highest stage, the highest place, love them for what they choose, for what they need, for what they want. You're not getting in the way. You're not using manipulation. You're not coming from codependence where you're afraid of abandonment, of them leaving you, or you're not afraid of being swallowed up and being under their control. None of that. You're not in the defense pattern of being swallowed up. You're not in the attached pattern of being gobbled up by being too dependent on someone despite them treating you poorly. None of that. That's because you'd be just as happy being alone as you would be with them. And knowing that you'd be self-sufficiently happy means that you can let them be who they are and love them in the manner in which they are. And that loving them in the manner in which they are will feel tremendously validating, that they are free and they're free to mobilize. It doesn't mean that they're free to be jerks. It just means that you have established a place where you have range of choices and things, that this is a human being that is a luxury in your life. They're there to be cherished like a diamond, or they're there to be cherished like something, a touchstone, a quintessential feature that you so appreciate when you look at and you love, because you know that when they're here as a luxury. They're here as an extra enrichment to your life that is so worth cherishing and watering like a sweet flower. I met a photographer at a wedding once, and I noticed some sorrow in him when he was shooting the shots of the wedding party, and I turned to him and I said, what's going on with you? Are you okay? And he said, no, my wife just died. I said, what do you mean? He said, she just died of cancer. I said, did you know? And he said, yes, it was a painstaking process. And I said, wow. I said, I don't know how to talk to you about this because I sense this really is a critical thing for you. This is life-changing. And he said, it is. And he turned to me and he said, John, he said, the one thing that I could say to you is there was never a day that I couldn't have said, I love you enough to my wife. There wasn't a day that I couldn't have said, I love you enough to my wife. I should have said it more. He said, now I see that was so critical, that was truly what was in my heart. And I should have told her that every day, that I wanted to say to her, I love you. And I love you means thank you for bringing me into the love that I am. Thank you for bringing me into the love that I am. Because when we relate with someone without the need to change them, we allow them to change us. We're astonished by them. We learn new things about them. They don't have to be in compliance with our conditions. If you only, then I would. If you only, then I would. Take away your if onlys. Tell them you don't want to change them. And they'll be willing to work with you. They'll be teammates. They'll say, I understand your emotional needs. I'd love to make them happen. Their will and ability will go up because they don't care what you want until they know you care. It starts with you. So be courageous. Put down the weight of your aloneness. Skipping over the entry point is your predicament. You can enter from anywhere, anytime. Amnesia is the forgetting that validity is only in one disruptive place, the now. The only way to validate what you know is by experiencing the present. The only thing that's real is what's right here, what you share with others, this moment. Whatever happens now is what you can make sense of. It may not be incompatible or compatible with what you already know. It probably won't be. But why not let it have its way? Why not soften your edges into it and let it be what it is? Because the wild card life plays warps predictions. The wild card. Did you hear that? The wild card life plays warps predictions. It does. You can't predict the future. You can create one. So you have to let go of wanting life to be the way that you thought it would go and reconnect with life itself. Expect nothing and be ready for anything and meet it. But you place your faith in your unexpected receptions. See, what if the current moment was what the future needed? You place your faith in the unexpected receptions. You place your faith in the unexpected perfection. That means that everything that the current moment has for you can be looked upon as, what if this was actually something that could be helpful? What has heart and meaning in this? What about what is currently present is showing me is a crack from the future? What is shining into me as a clue and signal that's helping me understand what I need to notice? What if I'm being given a gift, even though what I'm wanting is something else? What if the father that I got, the actual father I got, is different than the one that I expected? And instead of wanting a different father, what if I saw the gift in the father I had? What if the current career I had something in it to give me that's different, that's implicitly different than what I thought it would be? What if the gift that I got from my career was different? Yeah. Sometimes the things that we're expecting or looking for are what make us blind to the things that are sitting right here, to the blessings. Sometimes we have to back up far enough. Sometimes we have to be able to see it. Sometimes we have to see it and hold it. Choice is your entry. So, choice is your entry, not your listening that hears what you know. Choice is your entry. What you choose to be attention-oriented. You choose your qualities that matter to you. You choose. Choosing means you have options. Choosing means you're participating in how you put your attention on things. You choose to occupy an empathy. You choose to listen generatively to the universe and what your inner voice is saying. That's a choice. That's a fundamental orientation to choosing to live in the creative, to choose to live in the mystery, to choose to live in service to something bigger, to choose to live from what has heart and meaning. But choosing is your entry. And entering from here is leadership. Because leadership is a continuous access to the quality of expression you can occupy at any moment. That's leadership. How do we come into that quality of expression? Like what I'm talking about. We enter from here. We start with nothing. And then everything becomes interesting. We're available to go along with things that are presented to us. We're more flexible. So the answers used to come from outside to appoint you. But now the answers come from inside. See, they don't come from what you're seeing outside. They come from the inside in taking inspiration into how what is showing up for you changes you, inspires you, astonishes you. And when they do, people trust you because they know that you're operating from a place of availability, accessibility. And then you enter even though temptation attempts a diversion. So you might tempt yourself away from it. Something just says to you, don't see this, don't do this, or hey, go for this or go for that. Those are all normal things. We all have temptations. We hold the space for them. And if you make space for its gaze, the grasp loses to something better to do. Because all of our temptations are just psychological forces that live within us. And if we can commune with them and make space for those temptations, rather than decide on them, we can just hold whatever it is that we are craving or itching to do. But let those things just be there. Acknowledge them like old friends. So the partial possession of your intention is all yours. But the rest of it is left to arise from wise innocence. Did you hear that? You got to leave something out. Let life fill it in. That's how you go into it. That's your point of entry. But remember, your basic goodness locates expansions. That when you turn to the places where goodness is ready to happen, things begin to expand. You can trust that and follow it. And you stand poised with 0-point resistance to the blessings that await you. So you set your intention, but you stand poised in the position of restricting your restrictions. You let go of the judgment. You let go of your fear, and you give yourself, go out with full commitment, with trust to what is ready to emerge, to let the story unfold and let the pages be filled, because you've honored your inner voice so the world can hear it. Okay, so what is it to remember when entering now? There's a lot of insight in this presentation. And so now that you're looking back on it, I'd like you to maybe play it a few more times and that you listen to it in the way that I have taught you, that you enter here. And when you hear me, the way that you hear me is significant. The manner in which something stands out to you, words I say, sentences I say, are going to strike you because you're going to make this personal. This is something that you have to figure out what applies where. Right? These teachings are things that you have to take back into your life and say, okay, what's important? What struck me? So write down 3 of the most important insights that were resonating with you. And then ask yourself, where do I need to put this? What's the placeholder? Where do I put this? What's the parking spot? Where do I shoot this? And you'll see it. You'll begin to see where this needs to show up in your life. And then make a point to choose to follow it up, to set it in motion, and to stay true to it in the next 90 days. To enter. Maybe start a morning ritual, or maybe start an evening ritual, or maybe a certain pause that you do in the day to remind yourself of some of these fundamentals, some of these ideas. I know that when you remember when entering, you will be occupying an open mind and an open heart and an open will. All your organs of perception will be open. And those are all access points for creative intelligence. You'll cut the divide between your current self and your future self. You'll cut the divide between your current self and the other, and understanding others and making space for them, conserving legitimacy. And you'll make space for the emerging future possibilities that lie virtual, that are signaling you and summoning you right in the present moment, as if they are cracks that are shining in from the future, that if you make them the seeds of your creative process and you place them in there, you will begin to grow them and water them and stay with them until they arise and evolve. And as they do, you'll more and more see how they connected to your real self and what's so important to you. So just begin. Every moment is a chance to die back into life. You need to learn how to die in order for you to truly live. Death reminds us to live close to life. We're at an interesting moment. You're crossing over into a new year. This is a social meditation, what to remember when entering. I appreciated the time with you today. Be well. Thank you.